You're listening to the official Reformed Stoic podcast, covering politics, philosophy, theology, conspiracy theories. I'm ready to get to the bottom of this life. Are you? Join Wolfgang, Sketty Squad, Purity Gang, as we strive to take dominion over this dying planet. I am Reformed Stoic, and this is my podcast. Let's go hang tenny. How are we going? What's happening today, my friends? Man, there's a really cozy vibe in the atmosphere today, boyos. I at least got up a little bit earlier, picked up some groceries, and I ordered a couple of pounds of beef. None of those made it, so, yeah, I'm watching my fats slowly dry up in the house, and we're gonna carb it, baby. We're gonna carb it. Let's go. This is my last Diet Coke, then we're switching to Sierra Mist. So, Papa Stoic has some reading to do today. Big time. It's funny, for both Trilateral Commission and Council on Foreign Relations, there is not a lot on YouTube, dude. You can find their YouTube channels on YouTube, which I would not be surprised if you're not allowed to watch them. I got in trouble for watching CERN that one time. The CERN clip got automatically cut out. I kind of have a feeling a lot of these bigwig channels aren't going to be very friendly as far as letting you do your thing. Mic check, mic check. I might just need to move this a little bit closer. How we doing? How we doing? Microphone check, microphone check. All right, that should be better. Alrighty then, let's go ahead and get started today, guys. I got a lot of reading to do today. Like I said, that's what we got to do for the good sources. So, I recently watched a video on the Memory Hole channel, and it was breaking down Bilderberg, Council on Foreign Relations, and the Trilateral Commission. That is like a big part of the deep state, more or less. But I feel like when people are talking about deep state, they're referring to just the United States. I mean, really, the deep state, any way you slice it, is going to be a global kind of a deal, and these are some of the big power players out there. So let's go ahead and get it cranking. You're listening to the Reformed Stoic News segment. Let's go. Yes, you can. You cannot crank it. Yes, you can. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and start with the Wikipedia. Trilateral Commission. The Trilateral Commission is a non-governmental international organization aimed at fostering closer cooperation between Japan, Western Europe, and North America. It was founded in July 1973, principally by American banker and philanthropist David Rockefeller. How nice of him. Thank you, Mr. Rockefeller. An internationalist who sought to address the challenges posed by the growing economic and political interdependence between the U.S. and its allies in North America, Western Europe, and Japan. The Trilateral Commission is headed by an executive committee and 3 regional chairs representing Europe, North America, and the Asia-Pacific region, with headquarters in Paris, Washington, D.C., and Tokyo, respectively. Meetings are held annually at locations that rotate among the 3 regions. Regional and national meetings are held throughout the year. Most gatherings focus on discussing reports and debating strategy to meet the Commission's aims. Membership in the Trilateral Commission is highly selective and by invitation only. As of 2021, there were roughly 400 members, including leading figures in politics, business, media, and academia. Each country within the 3 regions is assigned a quota of members reflecting its relative political and economic strength. The organization represents influential commercial and political interests that share a commitment to private enterprise and trade, multilateralism, and global governance. This has subjected it to criticism for elitism. WEF, descended from the Club of Rome, World Economic Forum. I was just on this page the other day. Let's getty. The Council on Foreign Relations is the sister component to the British Royal Institute of International Affairs, a branch of the Royal Society. Aha. You know what? I'm going to have to add that one to my list. Royal Institute of International Affairs. Good one. That's one of the ones I keep forgetting about. So, the Trilateral Commission was formed in 1973 by private citizens of Japan, North American nations, U.S. and Canada, and Western European nations to foster substantive political and economic dialogue across the world. The idea of the Commission was developed in the early 1970s, a time of considerable discord among the United States and its allies in Western Europe, Japan, and Canada. To quote its founding declaration, growing interdependence is a fact of life of the contemporary world. It transcends and influences national systems. While it is important to develop greater cooperation among all the countries of the world, Japan, Western Europe, and North America, in view of their great weight in the world economy and their massive relations with one another, bear a special responsibility for developing effective cooperation both in their own interests and in those of the rest of the world. To be effective in meeting common problems, Japan, Western Europe, and North America will have to consult and cooperate more closely on the basis of equality to develop and carry out coordinated policies on matters affecting their common interests. Refrain from unilateral actions incompatible with their interdependence and from actions detrimental to other regions, and take advantage of existing international and regional organizations and further enhance their role. The Commission hopes to play a creative role as a channel of free exchange of opinions with other countries and regions. Further progress of the developing countries and greater improvement of East-West relations will be a major concern. Let's see what we got here. Zbigniew Brzezinski, a Rockefeller advisor who was a specialist on international affairs, left Columbia University to organize the group along with Edwin Rusenschauer, professor at Harvard and United States ambassador to Japan, George S. Franklin, executive director of the Council on Foreign Relations, Gerald C. Smith, SALT I negotiator, the Strategic Arms Limitation talks. Okay. And first North American chairman, Henry D. Owen, Foreign Policy Studies Director at the Brookings Institution. A lot of fancy people here. Brookings Institution, often stylized as simply Brookings, is an American research group founded in 1916. Located on Think Tank Row in Washington, D.C. Sounds like it glows. Max Constam, European Policy Century. The European Policy Center is a Brussels-based, not-for-profit think tank on European Union affairs. Oh, wow, all kinds of stuff going on here. Robert R. Bowie, the Foreign Policy Association and director of the Harvard Center for International Affairs. Wilmer Cutler and Pickering, Japan Center for International Exchange, Governor of Pennsylvania. Other founding members include Alan Greenspan, American economist, who served as the 13th chair of the Federal Reserve from 1987 to 2006. So we got some Federal Reserve people up in there. Works as a private advisor and provides consulting for firms through his company. Paul Volcker, American economist who served as the 12th chair of the Federal Reserve. We got a couple of Federal Reserve boys up in there. That's how you know our best interests are being taken care of. Aha, heads of the Federal Reserve. There you go. The organization's records are stored at the Rockefeller Archive Center. Let's take a trip there. The Trilateral Commission initiated its biannual meetings in October 1973 in Tokyo, Japan. In May 1976, the first plenary meeting of all of the Commission's regional groups took place in Kyoto, Japan. Since the 9th meeting in 1978, plenary meetings have taken place annually. Besides annual plenary meetings, regional meetings have also taken place in each of the Asia-Pacific Group, the European Group, and the North American Group. Since its founding, the discussion group has produced an official journal, Trilog. Okay, that's enough from Wikipedia. We got a Washington Post article from 1992. Beware the Trilateral Commission. All right. Big reading day for me, boyos. This is how we learn. Behind closed doors, of course, they are meeting this weekend in Lisbon. Some call them the shadow government, the establishment, the global elite that runs the world. They call themselves simply the Trilateral Commission. Chills run up spine. I'm getting a sarcastic tone here. Depending on which conspiracy theory you subscribe to, you chuds and your conspiracy theories, and the Trilateral Commission has found its way into many. This 19-year-old organization is anti-American, anti-democratic, anti-Christian, or anti-worker, and is scheming ultimately to abolish the sovereignty of nations and establish one world government. And of course, from this tone, we can gather that's not what's really going on. According to Lyndon LaRouche, fringe political candidate and convicted tax cheat, the Trilateral Commission is behind the international drug trade. Oh, the guy who said that it's a tax cheat. That means it must not be true. A writer affiliated with the far-right Liberty Lobby says the commission is forever plotting to raise taxes on Americans. See how they're throwing in all these poisoning the well fallacies? According to Lyndon LaRouche, fringe political candidate and convicted tax cheat, a writer affiliated with the far-right Liberty Lobby, so they're far-right, they're just like taking shots at all these people, anybody who says anything bad about the commission. Says the commission is forever plotting to raise taxes on Americans, siphoning the money overseas. Evangelist Pat Robertson believes it is somehow linked to Freemasonry and the occult, that it springs from the depth of something that is evil. Preposterous, say members of the Trilateral Commission. It is merely a discussion group on world affairs, composed of high-level corporate and public policy types from North America, Western Europe, and Japan. The Commission seeks only to promote international cooperation for the betterment of everybody. Nothing sinister. Its annual reports and task force papers are available for the public to read. Its membership list isn't secret. Just ask, and the Commission will send you stuff. Anyone who can dial directory assistance can get its New York phone number. Oh, you guys, it sounds like it's just a bunch of conspiracy theories. Let's all sign up for the newsletter. Still, plenty of ordinary educated people have no idea what the Trilateral Commission is or what it does. Even though its former members include George Bush and Jimmy Carter, there is a shroud of mystery around it. George Bush, skull and bones, director of CIA, president, big dog. The press secretary for Arkansas Governor Bill Clinton's presidential campaign didn't even know that Clinton is on it. Yes, Clinton is a trilateralist too. Coincidence? Oh, read on, my wide-eyed friend. And Mr. Bill Clinton graduated from one Georgetown University. One damn Jesuit boys. Now the truth can be told about the 325 people on the Trilateral Commission and the many previous members. They do run the world. The thing is, it has nothing to do with belonging to the Trilateral Commission, chuds. The TC is like a club for people who run the world anyway. Like Paul Volcker, former head of the Federal Reserve System, who is the Commission's new North American chairman, and Akio Morita, chairman and chief executive officer of Sony, the Japanese chairman, and Count Otto Lambsdorff, leader of Germany's Free Democratic Party, the European chairman. Who else is on it? Well, as of last April, top executives of AT&T, ITT, Xerox, Mobil, Exxon, the Chase Manhattan Bank, First Chicago Corp, General Electric. Aha, General Electric is talked about in a lot of Anthony C. Sutton Wall Street books. They had ties to Rockefeller, ties to FDR, and I believe they're involved in both the rise of FDR and then also the rise of the Bolshevik Revolution. TRW, Archer Daniels Midland, Pepsi, RJR, Nabisco, and Goldman Sachs, not to mention Nissan, Toshiba, and Fuji Bank. And such former foreign policy ultracrats as Henry Kissinger. I want to learn more about him. It sounds like he was a sketchball. He was a Nixon guy. Zbigniew Brzezinski, that's one of the, whatever. He's on the Trilateral Commission. Robert S. McNamara and George Shultz, and 5 U.S. senators, including John D. Rockefeller, of course, and House Speaker Tom Foley, and some professors. There's a handful of women, including Katharine Graham, chairman of the Washington Post. A few black people, too. Los Angeles Mayor Tom Bradley, for instance. But basically, we're talking about lots and lots of middle-aged white guys. Well, that must mean they care about me. Let's go. Who's not on the Trilateral Commission? Not one professional athlete, playwright, or pop star. Hey, who do you want running the world? Ted Danson? LMAO! Let's stop being conspiracy theorists, guys. I mean, come on. You want Ted Danson to rule the world? Sounds like that would be kind of a based world. What was he? He was Becker? We could live in Becker, dude. How about that? From right to left, maybe because it meets behind closed doors, maybe because it's packed with powerful international capitalists, maybe because one of its principal founders was banker David Rockefeller, whose surname reads like 666 to those who demonize the Eastern establishment. Whatever the reason, some folks just suspect the worst of the Trilateral Commission. These are not the types of people who get together for innocuous chit-chat, says Jim Tucker, who writes for The Spotlight, newspaper of the Washington-based Liberty Lobby. Let us survey the thickets of anti-trilateralism. With the takeover by the Trilateral Commission of the United States, through Jimmy Carter, there was an explosion of the drug culture and related degeneracy throughout the country. That's from A Program for America, published in 1985 by the LaRouche Democratic Campaign. It is a largely unspoken reality, the book continues, that the bankers and the IMF, International Monetary Fund, encourage dope growing and traffic as profitable free enterprise for the blood-sucking bankers. Co-conspirators, according to LaRouche, include the British monarchy, the Soviet Union, and the Zionist lobby. 3 years ago, on the stage of a crowded rock and roll club in downtown Washington, a young black man in paramilitary garb asked a largely white audience, "Who runs the world?" After a pause, he said, "The Trilateral Commission." That was Professor Griff, then a member of the rap group Public Enemy. In a subsequent newspaper interview, Professor Griff mentioned the commission while describing a wicked global Jewish conspiracy. Whoa there, buddy. In his 1991 book, The New World Order, Pat Robertson, founder of the Christian Broadcasting Network and a brief challenger for the 1988 Republican presidential nomination, writes portentously, "A single thread runs from the White House to the State Department to the Council on Foreign Relations to the Trilateral Commission to secret societies to extreme New Agers. There must be a New World Order. There must be world government, a world police force, world courts, world banking and currency, and a world elite in charge of it all. I do not believe that normal men and women, if left to themselves, would spend a lifetime to form the world into a unified world in order to control it. No impulses of that sort do not spring from the human heart, or, for that matter, from God's heart. Tucker, like Robertson, challenges the Trilateralists' cover story, that they're encouraging international cooperation for everyone's betterment. We can have trade with other nations, we can welcome their tourists, we can send food to starving children in Biafra, he'll tell you, but not a UN flag flying over Old Glory." What are you doing, Footy? Getting nice and woke. He calls himself a longtime observer of the Trilateral Commission as well as the Bilderberg Group, which since 1954 has sponsored annual off-the-record policy discussions among prominent Western Europeans and North Americans. Unlike the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderberg Group has no formal membership. It is run by a chairman, a steering committee, and an international advisory group. Tucker sees Trilateralists, Bilderbergs, and the New York-based Council on Foreign Relations, established in 1921 and long led by David Rockefeller, as a single elite network of globalists. And those are the three groups that were mentioned on the Memory Hole special that I watched. That's a big part of the deep state right there, guys. The shadow government. Tucker has traversed the United States and Europe to be near their meeting places. He says, once he even crashed a Trilateral Commission meeting. I didn't understand it because the guy was speaking German. It was kind of dull. A few minutes later, though, I was tossed out. With a friendly chuckle, he adds, "It's a lot of fun being a right-winger, you know?" Tucker also says he got a source inside the Bilderberg Group, whose name I only know as Pipeline. And it was Pipeline who provided Tucker with this stunning scoop in the April 20 edition of the Spotlight. Last June, Bill Clinton was anointed the Democratic presidential nominee by the Bilderberg Group. I think the whole thing is rather ludicrous, says Clinton campaign spokesman Jeff Eller. Governor Clinton made the decision to run and wasn't handpicked by anybody. Criticism of the Trilateral Commission comes from the far left as well. To Holly Sklar, who edited the 1980 anthology Trilateralism, the Commission represents the interests of multinational corporations and banks, which means it's contrary to the interests of third world countries and workers all over. It wants wages kept low. It wants voters kept apathetic and polarized. Apathetic. The Trilateral Commission is not a conspiracy and is not omnipotent, Scholar says, but that doesn't mean it's not influential. For example, she says the Commission set out to economically co-opt OPEC, persuading countries like Saudi Arabia to put their petrodollars back into Western banks and to buy weapons from the West instead of investing in developing countries. I think that their vision of world order is not a world order that is good for most people, she says. It has led very much to a system where a few people are enriched at the expense of very many. Global cooperation, I certainly don't see our purpose as one of the protecting the interests of multinational corporations, says Charles B. Heck, North American Director of the Trilateral Commission. We're trying to think about foreign policy issues in as broad a framework as we can. I see us serving a very broad public interest. Heck has heard all the attacks and critiques before. In fact, he used to do a lot of radio talk shows, particularly around 1979 and 1980. That seemed to be when the mythology was most intense. People had taken note of the number of former trilateralists in the Carter administration. There was Zbigniew Brzezinski, Carter's national security advisor, the man considered the ideological godfather of trilateralism. And also Walter Mondale, Cyrus Vance, Harold Brown, W. Michael Blumenthal, Andrew Young. During the 1980 presidential campaign, Bush's trilateralist background is said to have disturbed Ronald Reagan's supporters on the far right. On top of that, third-party candidate John B. Anderson was a trilateralist too. In Heck's view, right-wing anti-trilateralism has always been rooted in simple isolationism. This country finds it difficult to be so interdependent with the rest of the world, given our history and our national traditions, he said. It's a hard lesson for Americans to grasp. The idea behind creating the commission, he says, was that the United States would never again be in such a singularly dominant position as in the immediate post-World War II era, and that leadership in the world would have to be shared. Now, such matters as the ecology, a new focus of trilateralist study, will require global cooperation, Heck says. All right, let's take a break from this. And so here, we're going to need a little Lady Luck here. I'm not sure what show this is from. This is an old show. I got it playing at 125 speed, and we're only going to listen to it. We're not going to look at the video. But check this out.
They're the ones you should be arresting, not me.
Why don't you say that before?
What do we got here?
Cam, this is William Klein. He was wrecking an office.
But I just wanted to meet them face to face. I wanted them to admit what they were doing.
Who is they?
He was in the office of the Trilateral Commission.
Trilateral Commission.
Yeah, the Trilateral Commission.
All right, what is the Trilateral Commission?
It's an organization founded in 1973 by David Rockefeller to bring together business and political leaders from the United States, Europe, Japan, so they could work together for better economic and political cooperation between their nations.
Well, that's what they'd like us to believe. But you see, what they're really up to is a scheme to plant their own loyal members in positions of power in this country, to work to erase national boundaries and create an international community, and in time, bring about a one-world government with David Rockefeller calling the shots.
I take it they're pressing charges?
Yeah, well, he broke a globe and some UNICEF artwork.
Well, they're in on it, too.
Okay, Mr. Klein, if you
I'm
just...
telling you, our whole way of life as we know it is in jeopardy.
I appreciate that information.
But I have the documented evidence. It's all in there. Show him.
Well, he's got these magazines here.
Conspiracy Review? Suppressed Truth Roundup?
The whole master plan is exposed.
Yeah, well,
You're still not convinced, huh? Would you like to hear the names of just a few of the people who have been on the Trilateral Commission?
not particularly.
James Earl Carter. Heard of him?
Look, Mr. Klein...
Henry Kissinger. You heard of him? Walter Mondale.
Who?
Mr. Klein, this is...
John Anderson. George Bush. Now, you remember at the convention, everybody thought it was going to be Ford for Veep. You know what happened? David Rockefeller just picked up a phone, put in a call. Hey, Ronnie, forget Jerry, it's George. Bye. So, no matter who won in November, they had their man in the White House.
Are you through?
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay, just have
Listen,
a...
I'm sorry for yelling. It's just, I get so agitated when I think about what they're doing.
Try and relax now, Mr. Klein. You have a seat over there. You can give all this information to Sergeant Eaton, okay?
Thank you.
Sit down. Maybe Mr.
Hey, Wilson, get on out of here.
Thank you.
Here you go. Okay, that's it.
Thank you. Guess you think I'm just another crackpot, huh?
No, I think you voiced some legitimate concerns.
Really?
Sure. Any large organization of powerful people, even if it's not conspiratorial, is open to excess and abuse.
You know, you're the first person who's really understood what I'm talking about.
Well, I think you got some very valid criticisms of the commission.
Right.
And I'm certainly going to bring them up at the next meeting.
What?
I'm a member.
Oh, Carl, no!
No hard feelings.
Okay, so I'm not sure what show that is. It looks like some older British show, but yeah, the guy's spurging out about the Trilateral Commission, and everybody's laughing, and he's pretty much saying the real deal. Interesting stuff, and here's kind of my take on this stuff, guys. I'm not trying to like force you to decide that these things are bad, but most people just don't really know about these organizations. So what I would recommend you do is follow their channel on YouTube. Follow the Trilateral Commission's YouTube channel. Follow the Council on Foreign Relations YouTube channel. Just kind of see what they're saying about stuff. You know, that they're think tanks, and they're always going to be putting out this constant stream of media. They actually had Jordan Peterson on the Trilateral Commission show. Just kind of like take a look at their takes on things and say, does that sound like it's kind of in line with this New World Order that I'm not really all about? So, yeah, I'm just trying to make you guys aware of these things. Let's see here. Let's start here. It does not run the world, says Time Magazine editor at large Strobe Talbot. Ha ha ha. Time Magazine says it doesn't run the world. Well, the CEO of Time Magazine was heavily involved in Vatican II. He was a Skull and Bones. He's former CIA. Yale, Skull and Bones, CIA. Good old Time Magazine. Thanks, Time Magazine. I feel much better now. Time Magazine says that the Trilateral Commission doesn't run the world. Who's been a trilateralist for at least 6 years? Well, there you go. Somebody from the Trilateral Commission says they don't run the world. Present company emphatically excluded. It's made up of a number of highly influential people. The body itself does not presume some sort of unitary influence. In fact, quite the contrary. There's a lot of diversity. Yeah, so there's basically like a black woman in a pantsuit who's deciding like how you're going to be a slave. There's lots of diversity. People bought that kind of shit back in 1992, and they still buy it today, baby. The proceedings I would describe as much more like a large and high-powered seminar than a parliament or a board of directors. He says, David Gergen, editor-at-large at U.S. News and World Report, agrees. These things sound powerful until you go to them, he says. Then you find out that these are people who are genuinely interested in discussing things with each other. When private citizens can have those discussions in a frank and open way, that's helpful. Invited by David Rockefeller to join the commission last year, Gergen will address the Lisbon Conference, along with Talbot, on the American political scene. Why don't these annual trilateral get-togethers generate much news coverage? Why should they? Talbot says. People are not coming there to make news. To ensure an uninhibited discussion, Trilateral Commission meetings are deemed to be on background, which means Gergen and Talbot can't quote the participants. And how does the gathering measure up as a social event? Cocktail wieners aplenty or what? I would not call the proceedings Spartan, Talbot says. After all, these are people who know how to live well and like to live well. He adds, though, these are people who don't have to go halfway around the world for a good meal or a good bottle of wine. They come for something else, and that's the content of the discussion. Wonderful. Well, this article had that same tone as the show, where they're just kind of trying to laugh everything off. Oh, you crazy conspiracy theorists. So I'm not trying to shove a conspiracy down your throat. I'm just trying to say, hey, maybe when something big's going down in the world, maybe go see what the Trilateral Commission has to say. And then, you know, I just show you the list of usual suspects. It's like, oh, we got people from Time Magazine on there and Federal Reserve, John Rockefeller, and, man, all of our buddies. Oh, look, it's George Bush, Skull and Bone Society, former director of CIA, loving it, loving these people. Getting all these people under one roof to make decisions about the world, well, that just sounds cozy. That sounds like good times. Trilateral Commission agenda. This is like, dude, you can't find anything on YouTube on this. Look at this. They're getting fact-checked. Isn't it so funny how if something gets fact-checked, you know it's like, okay, we're getting into the deep waters here. Any of the shit, Bilderberg, New World Order, Trilateral Commission. All the realist shit gets fact-checked.
The 1970s saw intensified cooperation amongst leaders and significant personals from the countries of Europe, America, and Japan. This cooperation, instigated by David Rockefeller, an American banker, culminated into what was known as the Trilateral Commission, founded in 1973. He saw the importance of including Japan and European nations in global dialogue to push the world forward and into the 21st century. The Commission members included everyone from the United States Secretary of Defense to the CEOs of the largest media houses of the participating nations. An international relations textbook would define world order as the distribution of power among world powers. This redistribution of power would be inevitable with the current global scenario. One of the biggest contributors to this being climate change. With mass migration, depletion of resources, and unpredictable weather, there are bound to be multiple political and economic repercussions. Colonization of Mars and rapid advancement in space tourism in an attempt to be a multiplanetary species will also be a defining factor for the New World Order. The rise of artificial intelligence, China's economic growth, increasing decline of situations in the Middle East, global shift towards the right wing, and data scandals plunging us into cyber warfare brings us the need to evaluate a new world order. The committee will analyze threats and opportunities of the same, and hence consequentially shall also want to define the current world order as it stands today.
Man, let's get it! These guys are good friends of ours. Let's go. Multiplanetary species. We haven't landed on the moon yet. Based alert. Hello? Base department? Based. Okay, well, we got through all that reading. Let's do it all over again with the Council on Foreign Relations. Not to be confused with the United States Committee on Foreign Relations or European Council on Foreign Relations. The Council on Foreign Relations is an American think tank specializing in U.S. foreign policy and international relations. Founded in 1921, it is a non-profit organization that is independent and nonpartisan. So I think this was founded before the Trilateral Commission. It's based in New York City with an additional office in Massachusetts. Its membership has included senior politicians, numerous secretaries of state, CIA directors, bankers, lawyers. Wow, let's read that all again. Its members have included senior politicians, numerous secretaries of state, CIA directors, bankers, lawyers, professors, corporate directors and CEOs, and senior media figures. Man, let's be friends with all those people. CFR meetings convene government officials, global business leaders, and prominent members of the intelligence and foreign policy community to discuss international issues. CFR has published the bi-monthly journal Foreign Affairs since 1922. It also runs the David Rockefeller Studies Program. Oh, how nice of them. Hey, David Rockefeller also has stuff to do with the Trilateral Commission. Wow, it's like everything's fucking tied to David Rockefeller. Isn't that swell? Which influences foreign policy by making recommendations to the presidential administration and diplomatic community, testifying before Congress, interacting with the media, and publishing on foreign policy issues. Towards the end of World War I, a working fellowship of about 150 scholars called the Inquiry. This is another one that I want to learn about, the Inquiry. I just wrote this down in my notes the other day. So this is like an early incarnation. The Inquiry was tasked with briefing President Woodrow Wilson about options for the post-war world when Germany was defeated. This academic group, including Wilson's closest advisor and longtime friend, Colonel Edward M. House, as well as Walter Lippmann, met to assemble the strategy for the post-war world. The team produced more than 2,000 documents detailing and analyzing the political, economic, and social facts globally that would be helpful for Wilson in the peace talks. Their reports formed the basis for the 14 points, which outlined Wilson's strategy for peace after the war's end. These scholars then traveled to the Paris Peace Conference 1919 and participated in the discussions there. As a result of discussions at the peace conference, a small group of British American diplomats and scholars met on May 30th, 1919 at the Hotel Majestic in Paris. They decided to create an Anglo-American organization called the Institute of International Affairs, which would have offices in London and New York. Ultimately, the British and American delegates formed separate institutes, with the British developing the Royal Institute of International Affairs in London. Due to the isolationist views prevalent in American society at the time, the scholars had difficulty gaining traction with their plan and turned their focus instead to a set of discrete meetings which had been taking place on June 1918. Hey, that's before World War II. In New York City, under the name Council on Foreign Relations. The meetings were headed by corporate lawyer Elu Root, who had served as Secretary of State under President Theodore Roosevelt, and attended by 108 high-ranking officers of banking, manufacturing, trading, and finance companies, together with many lawyers. The members were proponents of Wilson's internationalism, but they were particularly concerned about the effect that the war and the Treaty of Peace might have on post-war business. The scholars from the inquiry saw an opportunity to create an organization that brought diplomats, high-level government officials, the academics together with lawyers, bankers, and industrialists to engineer government policy. On July 29, 1921, they filed a certification of incorporation, officially forming a Council on Foreign Relations. Founding members included its first honorary president, Elu Root, American lawyer, Republican politician, and statesman who served as Secretary of State and Secretary of War in the early 20th century. He also served as United States Senator from New York and received the 1912 Nobel Peace Prize. Let's get it. First elected president, John W. Davis. Okay. Secretary Treasurer, Edwin F. Gay. American economist, professor of economic history, and first dean of the Harvard Business School. In 1922, Gay, who was a former dean of the Harvard Business School and director of the shipping board during the war, spearheaded the council's efforts to begin publication of a magazine that would be the authoritative source on foreign policy. He gathered $125,000, which is equivalent to over $2 million in 2021, from the wealthy members of the council, as well as by sending letters soliciting funds to the 1,000 richest Americans. Using these funds, the first issue of Foreign Affairs was published in September 1922. Within a few years, it had gained a reputation as the most authoritative American review dealing with international relations. In the late 1930s, the Ford Foundation and Rockefeller Foundation began contributing large amounts of money to the council. Let's go. Let's hear it for the Rockefellers and Fords. Big businessmen. In 1938, they created various committees on foreign relations, which later became governed by the American Committee on Foreign Relations in Washington, D.C., throughout the country. Funded by a grant from the Carnegie Corporation, influential men were to be chosen in a number of cities and would then be brought together for discussions in their own communities, as well as participating in an annual conference in New York. These local committees served to influence local leaders and shape public opinion to build support for the council's policies, while also acting as useful listening posts through which the council and U.S. government could sense the mood of the country. Beginning in 1939, real Hitler hours, and lasting for 5 years, the council achieved much greater prominence within the government and the State Department when it established the strictly confidential War and Peace Studies, funded entirely by the Rockefeller Foundation. Let's go! The secrecy surrounding this group was such that the council members who were not involved in its deliberations were completely unaware of the study group's existence. It was divided into 4 functional topic groups: economic and financial, security and armaments, territorial and political. The security and armaments group was headed by Alan Wells Dulles, who later became a pivotal figure in the CIA's predecessor, the Office of Strategic Services. Whoa. That's sick, dude. He would go on to be pre-CIA. Dope. Man, Rockefeller, Ford, CIA, all of our friends are here, dude. Can we party it with our friends? CFR ultimately produced 682 memoranda for the State Department, which were marked classified and circulated among the appropriate government departments. Whoo! All right, you guys. Wow. Cold War era. All right, I'm going to go take a pee-pee, and we're going to keep getting through this, buddies. We're going to get through this together. Let's watch funny dogs. I will be right back. I got to take an epic pee-pee.
I was in the 3rd grade. People treated me like a criminal because I killed somebody.
Run.
I'ma cover my kid, bitch, I'm a mother. No drama.
I had a lot of things to do today, but you know what I did instead? I took a nap. It was a very good nap.
Just took a DNA test, turns out I'm 100%.
A potato.
Very big. My dog was dreaming, and my other dog went to check on him and scared him.
Something terrible happened in Memphis. We'll take a look at that eventually. Imagine believing a book that another person wrote not even 50 years ago. LMAO. Behold a Pale Horse. Yeah, I'm familiar with that book. Let's FEMA camp it. Yeah, I feel like this channel kind of is shaking up powerful people, bro. You know what I heard? I heard that 4chan, I obviously didn't have anything to do with this. 4chan's like reopening up the Pizzagate investigation because a little birdie's going around telling people that they need to go find the connection between Abraxas Corp and Pizzagate. Apparently, there were some Pizzagate videos floating around in 2017 and 2018 that ended up leading to Abraxas Corp somehow, and I am very interested to see if anybody can find that video, if anybody can find those connections, but sounds like the whole entire internet schizo investigation is opening back up. I, for one, am very interested to see what people find there. Alrighty, $30 for anybody who finds that video. Let's go! Alright, a critical study found that of 502 government officials surveyed from 1945 to 1972, more than half were members of the council. During the Eisenhower administration, 40% of the top U.S. foreign policy officials were CFR members. Eisenhower himself was a council member. Under Truman, 42% of the top posts were filled by council members. During the Kennedy administration, this number rose up to 51% and peaked at 57%. Under the Johnson administration, wow, all these presidents, like everybody's in the Council of Foreign Relations, dude. What's goody in the hoodie? Are they our friends? In an anonymous piece called The Sources of Soviet Conduct that appeared in Foreign Affairs in 1947, CFR study group member George Keenan coined the term containment. The essay would prove to be highly influential in U.S. foreign policy for 7 upcoming presidential administrations. 40 years later, Keenan explained that he had never suspected the Russians of any desire to launch an attack on America. He thought that it was obvious enough and he did not need to explain it in his essay. William Bundy credited CFR study groups with helping to lay the framework of thinking that led to the Marshall Plan and NATO. Due to a new interest in the group, membership grew towards 1,000. Dwight D. Eisenhower chaired a CFR study group while he served as president of Columbia University. Trinity Church, higher education, New York. Gotcha. One member later said, whatever General Eisenhower knows about economics, he has learned at the study group meetings. The CFR study group devised an expanded study group called Americans for Eisenhower to increase his chances for the presidency. Eisenhower would later draw many cabinet members from CFR ranks and become a CFR member himself. His primary CFR appointment was Secretary of State John Foster Dulles. Dulles gave a public address at the Harold Pratt House in New York City in which he announced a new direction for Eisenhower's foreign policy. There is no local defense which alone will contain the mighty land power of the communist world. Local defenses must be reinforced by the further deterrent of massive retaliatory power. After his speech, the council convened a session on nuclear weapons and foreign policy and chose Henry Kissinger to lead it. Kissinger spent the following academic year working on the project at council headquarters. The book of the same name that he published from his research in 1957 gave him national recognition, topping the national bestsellers list. On November 24th, 1953, a study group heard a report from the political scientist William Henderson regarding the ongoing conflict between France and Vietnamese communist leader Ho Chi Minh's Viet Minh force, a struggle that would later become known as the First Indochina War. Henderson argued that Ho's cause was primarily nationalist in nature and that Marxism had little to do with the current revolution. Further, the report said the United States could work with Ho to guide his movement away from communism. State Department officials, however, expressed skepticism about direct American intervention in Vietnam, and the idea was tabled. Over the next 20 years, the United States would find itself allied with anti-communist South Vietnam and against Ho and his supporters in the Vietnam War. The council served as a breeding ground for important American policies such as mutual deterrence, arms control, and nuclear non-proliferation. In 1962, the group began to program of bringing select Air Force officers to the Harold Pratt House to study alongside its scholars. The Army, Navy, and Marine Corps requested they start similar programs for their own officers. Whew, almost to the bottom here. A 4-year-long study of relations between America and China was conducted by the Council between 1964 and 68. One study published in 1966 concluded that American citizens were more open to talks with China than their elected leaders. Henry Kissinger had continued to publish in Foreign Affairs and was appointed by President Nixon to serve as National Security Advisor in 1969. In 71, he embarked on a secret trip to Beijing to broach talks with Chinese leaders. Richard Nixon went to China in 72, and diplomatic relations were completely normalized by President Carter's Secretary of State, another council member, Cyrus Vance. Vietnam created a rift with the organization when Hamilton Fish Armstrong announced in 1970 that he would be leaving the helm of Foreign Affairs after 45 years. New chairman David Rockefeller approached a family friend, William Bundy, to take over the position. American attorney and intelligence expert, an analyst with the CIA, Bundy served as a foreign affairs advisor to both presidents, John F. Kennedy and Lyndon B. Johnson. Let's go CIA all day. To take over the position, anti-war advocates within the council rose in protest against the appointment, claiming that Bundy's hawkish record in the State and Defense Departments and the CIA precluded him from taking over an independent journal. Some considered Bundy a war criminal for his prior actions. What? In November 1979, while chairman of CFR, David Rockefeller became embroiled in an international incident when he and Henry Kissinger, along with John J. McCloy, American lawyer, diplomat, banker, and presidential advisor, served as Assistant Secretary of War during World War II under Henry Stimson, helping deal with issues such as German sabotage, political tensions in the North African campaign. Okay. So, David Rockefeller became embroiled in an international incident when he and Henry Kissinger, along with John J. McCloy and Rockefeller aides, persuaded President Jimmy Carter through the State Department to admit the Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, into the U.S. for hospital treatment for lymphoma. This action directly precipitated what is known as the Iran hostage crisis and placed Rockefeller under intense media scrutiny for the first time in his public life. In his book, White House Diary, Carter wrote of the affair. David Rockefeller came in apparently to induce me to let the Shah come to the United States. Rockefeller, Kissinger, and Brzezinski seemed to be adopting this as a joint project. Whew. Okay, guys. Okay. That's a lot of reading. And this would be a lot more reading, but I think we've read enough for one freaking day. The second president of Ukraine's wife worked for the State Department and changed her name. Real. So, we got a little bit of a BitChute treat for you guys here. This is about 9 minutes. A Rhodes Scholar, you say? Cecil Rhodes, the Council on Foreign Relations. So Cecil Rhodes, you can read about him in the Anglo-American the Anglo Establishment from Carol Quigley. He's part of the Milner Group, or was he part of the Milner Group? He's from that whole Anglo Establishment information, yeah. Cecil Rhodes, I think he was part of the Milner Group, or he worked closely with the Milner Group. Let's go.
Its roots go way, way back in history. They go back to the formation of a secret society, a secret organization that was created by Cecil Rhodes. Very powerful and very wealthy individual. And people have heard about him in history, and they know about the Rhodes Scholarship, and they think, well, isn't that nice? But they don't understand at all what that's all about. Cecil Rhodes, when he died, left his great fortune not to his family, not to his heirs, but for the creation of a secret society. And we know about this because there were some people very intimately involved with this organization who wrote about it. One of the best authors on this topic is Professor Carol Quigley. He wrote several books. And
let's get it.
Tragedy and Hope is the best known of his. He described in detail the secret organization created by Cecil Rhodes. And he explains in these books he knows about them because he was invited by the organization into its inner circle. He was never a member of it, but he was invited in as their historian. And he was allowed to see their secret records and papers and study them for several years. And he knew all the important players, and he understood what it was about, and so he wrote these books. It's an amazing thing because he laid out in great detail what the purpose of the organization was and how they were the major players in all of the big international events since and including World War I. The bottom line is that you take the roots of that organization and you find out that they created in all of the British dependencies what they call roundtable groups. And then around those little roundtable groups, they created front groups. And the purpose of these front groups and roundtable groups was to penetrate into the governments of all of these different countries, to penetrate into the media centers, to penetrate into the educational systems. In other words, to penetrate into the social fabric, the power centers of society, and literally take them over from the inside without anybody being aware that they were controlling influence.
In the early 60s, a Georgetown University professor collects information for a book favorable to the network of powerful men who founded the CFR. For 2 years, Professor Carol Quigley is allowed to examine
Georgetown University. That's that Jesuit university, man. That's where the president of Intrepid graduated from. Bill Clinton graduated from. Donald Trump's kids. All kinds of bigwigs, man. That's an intelligence actor recruiting school, basically. Jesuit hype.
Examine the confidential papers and secret records of this network. Quigley reveals that these men aim to create a world system of financial control in private hands, able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole. In short, they seek total and quiet control of the entire world. And the CFR is their most visible conduit for carrying out that agenda. CFR members include America's wealthiest tycoons, as well as the highly placed elite in government, academic institutions, tax-exempt foundations, and the establishment media. Ruling Class Journalists, written by Richard Harwood, describes the CFR membership as the ruling establishment in the United States. The Washington Post article boasted that news reporters who are CFR members do not merely analyze and interpret foreign policy for the United States, they help make it. Who are these policymakers? Many of their faces are familiar. NBC's Tom Brokaw, CBS's Dan Rather, ABC's Barbara Walters, Jim Lehrer of PBS, William F. Buckley of National Review, media mogul Rupert Murdoch, owner of the giant multifaceted News Corporation. These media heavyweights, and many others like them, are members of the CFR.
The Norman Cousins Global Governance Award, Walter Cronkite.
Thank you very much, Richard, and I am delighted to be here in these new headquarters. I have been often to, I guess, the mothership in New York City, but it's good to have an outpost of the council right here down the street from the State Department. We get a lot of advice from the council, so this will mean I won't have this far to go to be told what we should.
We get a lot of advice from the council. Let's get it.
Be doing and how we should think about the future.
When Bill Clinton delivered his acceptance speech at the 1992 Democratic National Convention, the only person he mentioned, other than his mother and grandfather, was his history professor at Georgetown University Foreign Service School.
As a teenager, I heard John Kennedy's summons to citizenship. And then, as a student at Georgetown, I heard that call clarified by a professor named Carroll Quigley.
Professor Quigley's 1,300-page book, entitled Tragedy and Hope, described the small elite, which he said actually runs the United States. Quigley labeled it the network and said it consists of men who are cosmopolitan and international, close to governments, equally devoted to secrecy and the secret use of financial influence in political life. Quigley wrote that this network always prefers big government, big federal spending, large foreign giveaways, and the stability of a planned society rather than the uncertainties of the free market. Professor Quigley taught his student from Hope, Arkansas, how to tap into the power centers of the network. When Bill Clinton became president, he surrounded himself with people who shared that vision.
When Bill Clinton took office in 1993, he appointed his Rhodes Scholar roommate as his personal foreign policy advisor. Strobe Talbott had spent 22 years as a writer for Time magazine, where his writings revealed his eagerness to get rid of patriotism, American sovereignty, and independence. In the July 20th, 1992 Time, Talbott wrote an article entitled The Birth of the Global Nation. He enthusiastically predicted that in the next century, nationhood as we know it will be obsolete. All states will recognize a single global authority. In fact, wrote Talbott, national sovereignty wasn't such a great idea after all. Talbott bragged about how our national sovereignty and independence have already been diminished by the International Monetary Fund and the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, or GATT agreements. He boasted that the internal affairs of a nation are no longer off limits to world governments. For his article, Talbott received an award from the World Federalist Association, a group committed to world governments, and a congratulatory letter from Bill Clinton.
World government is the structure necessary for global justice. You, sir, have been a lifelong advocate of this principle, and it is appropriate, therefore, that we present you with this amethyst geode.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. First, we Americans are going to have to yield up some of our sovereignty. That's going to be, to many, a bitter pill. Any attempt to achieve world order before that time must be the work of the devil. Well, join me. I'm glad to sit here at the right hand of Satan.
We would like to bring you...
I'm glad to sit here at the right hand of Satan. Just things that people who rule the world say, hype.
A message from the First Lady of the United States, Hillary Rodham Clinton.
Good evening and congratulations, Walter. I'm receiving the world...
I'm happy to sit here at the right hand of Satan. Hillary Clinton, you have anything to say, my good friend? You see, guys, one of my favorite things is like when this is all in that pot, it's like, oh, he worked for the Council of Foreign Relations, and he went to Georgetown University, and then he worked at the CIA, and then they all met at the Bilderberg Group, and then David Rockefeller gave him money. Coom, dude. That's when you know, like, you're in it. Like, oh, they were meeting with the bankers from the Federal Reserve, and Rockefeller, and Council on Foreign Relations, Trilateral Commission, and then they met with the Jesuits, and they graduated from Oxford University, like, and they're Skull and Bones, and then Time Magazine said, like, dude, once you start seeing all those things be talked about, like, that's the establishment, guys. That is the establishment, and I'm not trying to tell you, like, this stuff is all bad. It's just you need to know it exists. And the thing is like, they don't want you to know that it exists. Like, when you just start subscribing, it's like, oh, let's see what the Trilateral Commission has to say. Let's keep up with Georgetown University. Oh, what's going on at CIA headquarters? Like, just start holding these people accountable, bro. Like, see what they got to say. See what their narrative is. And I am of the belief that you will start to see some commonalities. You'll start to kind of see what the bigwigs are all saying, and it's kind of in line. And, yeah, it's more or less not good, if you ask me.
Federalist Association's Global Governance Award.
Large segments of our citizens believe that the United Nations is taking over whole blocks of counties in Kentucky and Tennessee. Yeah. And some of them, they believe that we're going to the concentration camp, and they're going to give our army to Russia and all that baloney.
The issue is, we live in an interdependent world. We have to cooperate with people. We're better off than we do. We're better off with NATO. We're better off with the United Nations. We're better.
Whew, man, that was juicy. That was juicy, you guys. You know, this podcast, you guys who are here for the lives, you guys are legends, bro. This ain't all about the live. I want you guys, I'm going to, like, make some, first of all, I'm going to make a playlist with all of the podcasts that are happening on this channel. This is my backup. We're going back to the main in October. We still got the bulk of this month to go. I want to start putting these podcasts in playlists. I want these to get spread around, guys. I'm leaving a legacy behind. Some of these, you know, they just contain good information that can fill people in on red pills, like 10 years from now. Like, this is stuff that's going to be left behind, guys. And, you know, if anything ever happens to me, I want this channel to be safe. I want these videos to have long lives. Yeah, man. I want this information to get out there. This is good stuff. The Order of 322, also known as the Skull and Bones, or the Hidden Hands, is a group of 322 of the world's richest families. The podcast is the Lord's work. Thank you, Wiggy Wigsell. I appreciate that. Leaving behind a legacy hype. Yeah, this is for real ones, guys. This ain't a popularity contest. Not a lot of people make it this far, you guys. So, yeah. Council on Foreign Relations, Trilateral Commission, good stuff to know about. We'll have to cover the one that Rick mentioned earlier someday as well. Sister component to the British Royal Institute of International Affairs, a branch of the Royal Society. Yep, I screenshotted that. It's good to know all this stuff, guys. So, looks like it's going to be another shorter day today. We got a nice little 17-minute video here. How do we know Jesus is the Messiah? Let's figure it out, gang. Green
Today we enter the second week of Advent, a season set aside to dwell on Christ, the King whom shepherds guard and angels sing. As Christians, we believe Jesus is the anointed Messiah, the Davidic King, the Christ. But how did we arrive at such a massive claim? Historically, this has proven to be no small debate. If Christ is the long-awaited Messiah, why does the Old Testament have so few unambiguous texts we can point to as proof? in his detailed investigation of the origins of Messianism. New Testament scholar Joseph Fitzmyer goes so far as to conclude that hopes of a messianic figure within Judaism intensify only after the Old Testament canon is closed. And even when the term Messiah is used in the Old Testament, it often has nothing to do with a single messianic figure. So how did the apostles and the earliest Christians arrive at such a clear link, claiming with confidence that the Jesus born in Bethlehem was the anointed king? To answer this question and to better understand what we celebrate in Advent, I turn it over to Dr. Don Carson, co-founder and president of the Gospel Coalition. He joins us over the phone to answer the Advent question, what child is this?
I suppose that for many Christians in the West who have not been exposed to much Bible reading yet, when they hear Jesus Christ, they're thinking Jesus is his first name and Christ is his second name or his family name. So one might almost refer to him as Mr. Christ. But of course it was never that way in the first century. Christ was not initially, at least in any sense, a family name. It was a title. And it's disputed today whether it ever becomes fully a name anywhere in the New Testament. My own view is that it never loses its titular function, even if it does pick up some naming function in the later New Testament books. But let's back up a wee bit. Christ is simply transliteration for the Greek word Christos, which means someone who's anointed. And it's equivalent to Messiah, which is translation from the Hebrew word Meshiach, which means someone who's anointed. Thus, if we were actually using translation, Jesus Christ means something like Jesus the Anointed One. But that needs to be unpacked in any case. In the Old Testament, anointing that is literally carried out is the act of applying oil to an object or a person. This can be done by smearing the oil or pouring a little bit on the person or the thing, rubbing it in a little bit. And the thing that thus has been anointed then is set aside in some way. And in the Old Testament, in terms of people, there are just about three categories of people who are anointed by oil as a way of indicating that they've been designated for a certain role, a certain function. For example, in the Jotham fable in 1 Kings 9:7 and following, it's aimed at those who had made Abimelech king of Shechem. But in this fable, the trees are portrayed as wanting to anoint one tree to be king over them. That is, to designate one tree, to appoint one tree. And then later on, for example, when the men of Judah anoint David king over the house of Judah, 2 Samuel chapter 2, the same sort of thing is operating. So anointing with oil is very, very common in the Old Testament in terms of designating someone a king. And then secondly, it's also used in connection with designating someone priest. Moses receives instructions to anoint Aaron high priest, Exodus 29, Leviticus 8, and so on. And not just Aaron, but his sons. And a number of times the sons are said to have been anointed, Exodus 28, 41, Exodus 30, and other passages. Indeed, in some sense, Leviticus 7:36 goes so far as to say that it is God, Yahweh himself, who anointed Aaron and his sons. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean that he took a flask of oil and literally poured it over their heads or something of that order, but he did it through his designated agents. But again, it's a way of saying that someone has been set aside for a particular task. Then, although there's no general anointing of prophets, there is one remarkable passage in 1 Kings 19:16. Elijah is told to anoint Elisha to be his successor as prophet. Now, when the event comes, we're not told that he actually poured oil on him. Rather, Elisha, when Elijah departs, asks for and receives a double share of Elijah's spirit. So it may even be that reception of the Spirit is considered the reality of the anointing. just as in 1 John, Christians are said to have the anointing, and in the context, almost certainly that means they've got the Spirit, even though they haven't all been smeared with oil or the like. So you begin to get a kind of sense of the relationship between the physical act, the ritual act, and what it is designating. Now, by the time you get to the New Testament, it's not uncommon to ask questions about messianism, that is, the expectation that a Messiah would come who would save his people, who would transform them, who would bring in the new age, who would bring in the end of days, and so on. And a majority of scholars today argues that there is, strictly speaking, no use of Messiah, Christ, in the Old Testament that is unambiguously foretelling, that is, unambiguously announcing the coming of the Messiah, par excellence. That's almost right, but not quite, in my view. Usually, the word anointed refers to ordinary kings and priests and so on, without pointing forward. For example, Saul, King Saul before David, who eventually lost his throne, is called the Lord's anointed, 1 Samuel 12, 3 and 5. And that's why David spares his life. One should not raise his hand against the Lord's anointed, we're told, 1 Samuel 24:7, and other passages. That means we're not to raise our hand against the person whom the Lord has appointed to a particular task, even if that person, like Saul, has become corrupt. God will deal with him. But likewise, later, the Amalekite who claims to have killed Saul at his own request to put him out of his misery, he is put to death by David because he did not observe the rule of not killing the Lord's anointed, 2 Samuel 1, 14 to 16. And specifically, Psalm 105:15 says, "Do not touch my anointed ones, do my prophets no harm." So in all such cases, the anointed person or persons are kings, priests, prophets, as in this last passage, and they are not themselves unambiguously messianic in the prophetic sense. They're not referring to the Messiah, the Christ. But there are some passages, like Psalm 2 and a handful of others, where the immediate context really does suggest a Davidic king in the historical sphere, and yet the same context also points forward beyond the immediate historical sphere to the ultimate David. There's a Davidic typology that is built right into the treatment. Psalm 2 is especially telling in that regard. It's a wonderful psalm and is unambiguously messianic in some respects, but it's messianic through a typology. We've dealt with this one briefly before when we considered the sonship language. You recall how it begins, "Why do the nations conspire and the peoples plot in vain? The kings of the earth rise up and the rulers band together against the Lord and against his anointed." That's against his Meshiach, against his Messiah, against his Christ, saying, "Let us break their chains and throw off their shackles." And in one sense, of course, that can be read against the background of local, regional, petty kings trying to rebel against David or Solomon in the days of the unified monarchy. Yet when you press on, you discover that the language becomes so extravagant that it's looking forward to the ultimate Messiah against whom people rebel. And it's quoted by the Christian church in Acts chapter 4, for example, when persecution is arising and Christians are thinking it through in the light of Scripture, and they quote precisely these words: "Why do the nations conspire and the peoples plot in vain against the Lord and His Messiah?" And in all such contexts, such use of Messiah in Psalm 2 and related passages is clearly referring to the Davidic king, either at the historical level, the immediate Davidic king, or on the long-scale typological level, the ultimate Davidic king. So that when you get to the wonderful confession of Peter in Matthew chapter 16 and parallel, "Who do people say that I am?" And Peter responds, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. You are the Messiah." And how is Messiah understood in that context? The Son of the living God. Probably not in the context understood to be the second person of the Trinity or something of that order, though that's not denied. It simply isn't the focus. But the Son of God language, as we have seen earlier when we considered both the expression Son of God and when we considered kingship themes, Son of God is regularly used once a Davidite has come to the throne. The day that he comes to the throne, God says to him, "Today I have begotten you." He's taken on as God's son, as God's king. God is the supreme king, and insofar as the Davidite reigns under God with God's concern for justice and integrity and the preservation of the covenant and all of that, then he's acting like God. He's God's son. And thus Son of God in one of its uses regularly refers to the Davidic king. And my guess, then, is that what Peter is saying, most people would agree with this, I think, is when he confesses that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God, he's really saying he's the promised Davidic king. He's the Messianic king. He's the anointed king. And there was expectation that when that Messianic king came, he would bring in the ultimate age. And that grows with time. Many of the connections with the Old Testament, however, are through these typological lines of sonship and Davidic kingship and so on of that order. So in the New Testament, then, Jesus is regularly referred to as the Christ. And in most cases, it means the promised Davidic king. It's a way of alluding to the coming, dawning kingdom. But in some passages, the title gets blurred over, I think, to a larger, sweeping expectation of God's promised Redeemer, God's promised revelation of himself, so that he comes to transform. There are hints of that in the Old Testament when you see in Isaiah 9, for example, that the one who is coming, unto us a son is born, unto us a child is given, and he shall reign on the throne of his father David. There's the Davidic sign. But he shall also be called the Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. So that even though Messiah is not used there, because Messiah is regularly used for the Davidic king, this becomes a passage that is espousing a messianism, that is an expectation of a Redeemer to come, who's in the line of David, even though the term Messiah is not actually used there. And this is so important a title that John's Gospel, for example, when it articulates its purpose in John 20, 30, and 31, many things have not been written about Jesus, but these are written that the Christ, the Son of God, to show that the Christ, the Son of God, truly is Jesus, and that by believing we might have life in his name. So this messianic language is tied to a number of other biblical theological themes that we really don't have time to unpack here, but I'll mention one of them. People who study Mark's Gospel often detect what is sometimes called in Mark's Gospel the messianic secret. And what they mean by that is that sometimes Jesus' identity as the Messiah is hidden or is a title that is actually not to be disclosed right away because for whatever reason Jesus tells the disciples or tells the person who's been healed, for example, not to announce who he is. So in some sense it's a messianic secret. That language can go too far and become instantly deceptive. Part of the reason why Jesus hides his identity in some respects is because local expectations of a coming Redeemer, of a coming King, were often so political that if Jesus simply said, "I am the Messiah," he would be heard to be saying something that he doesn't in fact mean. I am here to establish the political kingdom and turf out the Romans and set up the throne exactly as it was in the days of David 1,000 years earlier, and this time we're going to win. Whereas the kingdom that Jesus has in mind is far more transcendent than that, far more sweeping, but working on very different principles. And so Jesus is in the strange place where sometimes he acknowledges that he's the Messiah, and sometimes he skirts the question precisely because he doesn't want false expectations to arise. But writing decades after the event, then John can say far more categorically, these are written in order that you might believe that the Christ, the Messiah, the Son of God, really is Jesus. So part of the problem then is the inability of the disciples, let alone of the larger crowds, to see how rich and biblically faithful and Davidic this notion of the Christ, the Messiah, the sonship of God really is as applied to Jesus, and it cannot be reduced to merely lineal descent and an earthly kingdom that does not have all of the sweeping power of the kingdom displayed in the New Testament. So that's how the term Messiah works. And when we say Jesus Christ, we should be thinking in our mind, Jesus the Messiah, Jesus the promised priest, king, prophet, Jesus the one who is anointed by God to bring about our redemption, Jesus who has been set aside by God, anointed by God, the ultimate Redeemer, the ultimate anointed one, the ultimate Christ.
Amen. That's so helpful. Very grateful to God for Dr. Carson, the co-founder and president of the Gospel Coalition, for his willingness to take up the topic. This is our 14th installment of Don Carson working through major themes in biblical theology here on the podcast. Sonship was earlier. He alluded to that a couple of times. Today, of course, the topic was Messiah. You can find the other episodes at desiringgod.org. Search for Don Carson's name in the search bar. Thanks for listening to this extra long APJ episode. I'm
podcast inside of a podcast, baby. Oh, man. All kinds of learning today. Me running the show. I got to focus the whole time, man. So, yeah. Yep, I think a lot of these podcasts are going to be helpful information for people who don't even know about its existence yet. Let's go. Spread the word if you can. Maybe post some of my spiciest podcasts in message boards and forums, and I am gonna open up my Bible here pretty soon. We're wrapping things up right now. I'm gonna spray some Febreze. I wish I had a candle, man. Things are feeling pretty cozy over here. It's a rainy day, but the house is full of groceries, and life is good, man. I think tonight I will throw on Friday the 13th Part 2. Let's go. Infotainment. Let's go. Thank you for being here, my friends. I think we're calling it just about an hour and a half today. Sometimes we go for 2.5 hours. Sometimes we go for 1.5 hours, man. We just do whatever we want to do, bros. That's what it's all about when you're gang affiliated. We will not foil. God bless you, my friends. We'll be chilling tomorrow and next podcast on Friday. Thanks for being here, gang. God bless, and I'll see you next time.